Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter. Today, Mark and Sean talk about things while I sit here and stare at things off camera and look weird.
Perfect. I'm going to cut that out. That is going to be our default intro. Henceforth, moving forward.
So, Kelly, you sent us a link for an article I had actually seen before about Alan Moore and his thoughts on the comic industry and how he's not going to take part in it and that sort of thing anymore. Mark, you said you had a bunch of ideas on that. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? I have some too. I'll go into that.
All right. I did. I had some thoughts. Well, first of all, he's like 73, 75. Yeah. So I'm like, he's
something
pretty
like
old,
that.
right? You know.
Hey.
And so him saying that, I'm not going to take part anymore. I'm like, well, I mean, don't get me wrong. He is Alan Moore. He can take part in the comics industry as long as he wants, right? I mean, nobody's going to say, no, Alan Moore, we don't want your comic books, right? It'd be like some publisher saying, no, thank you, Stephen King. We don't need your ideas, okay? So
don't you put him in the same
Moore,
sentence as Stephen King?
I get it, but you know what I'm saying. So he's gonna go off and write prose. He's gonna write short stories and maybe novels or something like that. So he's still endeavoring to be creative and like I have no issues with that. And I think most of us are familiar with how he's been basically royally screwed by DC in some of their contractual stuff. And again, part of that is poor contracts. If your contract is, hey, when this goes out of print, I get the rights back, and there's no like expiration date or no like, hey, if it goes out of print or X number of years have passed, that just sounds like a bad contract. You know what I'm saying? And not to defend DC or whatever, they had an unexpected hit. They saw piles of money. Hey, whatever. So he's had some issues and whatnot. But like I say, I'm a fan of his. I love League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's like one of my favorite comics, etc. And I'm reading the article, and I was like, okay, I can see all this. He's off, wants to go do his own thing. That's cool. And then he started to take a swipe at like comic book movies. And like, here's a guy who has written some of the most seminal graphic novels that have stood the test of time, and he's like, I was writing these for young boys, and that was it. They're not meant to be taken seriously. And I see people going to these big movies, and it felt a little like, okay, yeah, comics have matured and grown up and turned into this big mass market appeal properties, including some of his, I might add. Yeah. And then to retroactively go back and say, oh, I was just writing those for, little kids. Watchmen is not for 12-year-old boys. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so like your body of work doesn't really match what you're saying. So I took that as a little bit of like sour grapes, and it's so easy to take pot shots at Marvel.
He strikes me very much as
it was Scorsese's done it. A couple other people have done it.
Scorsese's done it, yeah. Scorsese's, that bugged me a lot. Scorsese's one. Because it comes off as
I'm like, okay, look, if we want to make a monster movie, we'll come talk to you. But have you made other movies, really? I mean, come on, man. You're very good, but just because people like other things, I mean,
he made the prototype to Alice, the old
make?
TV show Alice. It was it was a movie called. It's true. It was a movie called Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And it was like one of his first movies that he'd ever directed or something. I just like bringing that up because it's so incongruous.
I missed that one.
Goodfellas, okay. And he also made the prototype for Alice.
I love Goodfellas. Like the Goodfellas is probably in my top 10.
Well, them being great creators has nothing to do with that other aspect of their life, their viewpoints on everything. It's just because you're a creative genius in a certain area doesn't mean that you're going to be enlightened in everything or that you're going to be awful in everything. They've got their own personalities, their own opinions and stuff like that. It just comes across as very pretentious in many ways. I get, by the way, Alan Moore's upset. I get it because he even says in that article, he's got a comment in there about saying, I will always be a fan of and love the comics medium. right? But he says, I hate and can no longer take part in the industry. Well, I get that. I get that. That's kind of how I felt about the sculpting thing,
Yep.
you know?
I do get that. I'm on board. I'm with you.
Yeah. The thing I have an issue with is his analysis of the fascist movement and how it's the comics is a precursor to fascism. And I'm thinking to myself, well, where's that come up? Was that how Hitler came about?
Where'd that
was
come
that
from?
was you know, and I was
remember,
trying to
Marvel
connect the
and
dots.
DC have been based in New York City, right? And
New York
these comic
City.
companies have been based in New York City our entire adult career, which is, you know, the bastion, the birthplace of fascism, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, and I know DC moved out west a little while ago, whatever. But I mean, you know, it's not like these are run by you know little Mussolini running around in there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It came across to me as kind of painting with a very broad brush, and
true. But to be fair, though, isn't he British? Like, he doesn't live in America. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's not. We're in DC, right? And so we're, you know, well, two of us are, and the three of us have grown up in the DC area. So so a lot of, you know, American politics is local sports for us, and so I get that if you live in England, you have a different perspective, because all you're getting is reporting from whatever your news source might be over there that you choose to consume. Because I think he said he's not on the internet at all. You know what I'm saying? So he had a funny line about, you know, if I want like porn or pictures of cats, I'll just have my assistant bring it to me.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, that's fine. But the thing is that as much as I am, what would be a good word? Disillusioned with, I guess, the sculpting industry, let's say. I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I still, you know, there's a lot of good people that are in that industry. It's just there's a small percentage of folks, and many of them have a lot of power in there, who make things difficult, but there's good people there. Hell, that's where we met Rich. That's where we met Drew. That's where we met, you know, all kinds of our friends.
Dan.
So many people that we know. Dan, yeah. So many that, not so much Robbie.
Right.
So many people that we know that were from that industry or are in that industry who are really good. It's chock full of good people, and there's a few bad apples in there. And because you had some experience with some of those obtuse or let's go as far as malevolent, apples that gave you those experiences, and they were severe experiences for him, sure. I don't think it's enough to sit there and just bash, you know, and then to turn around and bash the fans in a roundabout way, that it's playing down to, like, we're meeting these things on our way into this regression to a 12-year-old, you know, and I don't think that's so. I think that's a myopic viewpoint.
Yeah, like I just didn't buy for a second that all his body of work was written for like 12-year-old boys. Because when you look at it, there's some very sophisticated and sometimes dark stuff here that is very adult and has, I think, drugged the comic industry away from just being for kids. You know what I mean? That just struck me as like sour grapes, right? And I look at it the same way. When Lady Gaga got really big, Madonna was like, "Oh, I was doing that back in the '80s." We're like, "We get it. You were big in your time, and now's a new generation of artists who are coming along. You don't have to tear them down because they're, you know, the next big thing."
Yeah.
It'd be like Robert Redford tearing down Brad Pitt because he came along and now he's the new leading man in Hollywood or whatever. I'm like, you know, these things are cyclical. You know, you're fighting against.
But doesn't
you're tearing things down because you feel like someone's encroaching on your territory when there's room for everybody. You know what I mean? You don't have to like. You know, you can like Madonna and you can like Lady Gaga. Liking one doesn't detract from the other. You know, but
Lady Gaga was better.
She definitely was better.
More always struck me as very counterculture. He was is a contrarian. And if he were successful and adored and loved by everybody and all that stuff, and, you know, business-wise, and nothing had gone wrong. He was Stan Lee, right? If he was more of a Stan Lee type character, I think he would hate it. I think he could not live like that because he's He's just a contrarian, and he doesn't want that sort of thing. And so I think for his own comfort, he ends up putting himself in that position many times. And not again, not that he hasn't been taken advantage of. I think there's horrible stuff that has been done with that, But I think that doesn't mean that he's not that kind of person as well. You can have the two. It just magnifies him.
I think he can sit there as a person who was, one of the preeminent figures in the comic industry. I think he could sit there and bash the industry. And I think there's a lot within the comic industry that could legitimately be bashed. When I read his comment about how comics were made for 12-year-old boys, I don't think there's really a strong way to refute that, because he was in the industry. He knew what he was writing towards. He knew what the audience was, and the comics industry as a whole. I mean, once you know what your niche is, like you brought up Lady Gaga and Madonna. Sure, they both could have done the same bloody thing, but the reality is the music industry, the people who have the big bucks and set the general tone, they know what the public wants to consume because they've sold that thing for the last 30 years, and they just said, do that. And I mean, that's just what it is. So maybe he feels stifled, and that's why he's lashing out by the whole thing. But even to go back earlier to one of your points, Sean, if you've got something that you enjoy doing, but the industry as a whole is kind of crap about it, and there's all these roadblocks to try to get where you want to go, I think, you got to acknowledge that there's people out there that are good within the industry, but you also have to acknowledge that the industry doesn't have to morph to fit you. If he really hated the comic format so much, then go do something else. You have the name recognition. You could easily gin up some backing to go do something. I think this thing, at the end of the day, where somebody lashes out at an industry that is not the best. I mean, I'll give you your lashing out, but then do something about it. Don't just sit there and piss and moan about it.
Well, I think a couple things on that is that originally, who was it made for? I don't know, man. Ask the I can't remember their names now. The two creators of Superman, or the Spirit, or any of the old comics, or any of that. Ask them who it was made for. You go to some of them, like was
or
Pogo?
Even go newer. Let's go to the Jim Lee X-Men from.
Well, no. I'm talking about even simpler. You go to like Pogo, right? You Kelly knows who I'm talking about. I don't know if Mark knows, but you like Walt Kelly stuff. Was that for 12-year-old kids, or was that for someone who was older? Because you have a lot of right. It was for both. And sometimes one, sometimes the other, or the kid in that person, or that kind of thing. But there was so much social commentary in there about communism, about various elected officials, and so much stuff that as a kid would go over my head. I didn't care about. I just wanted to see Albert and Pogo out there doing their thing. But as I get older, I see those nuances, right? So I think to reduce the entire medium to this, well, it's for 12-year-old kids thing, isn't quite so. I mean, it's a medium that's been used for all of time, and it's used to tell a story. Was Mouse about, for 12-year-old kids?
Totally for 12-year-olds.
I was just going to say that. Mouse.
Yeah.
And there's so
I picked it up and I just said, yuck.
There's so many different.
Yeah, I didn't really like the art. The art style wasn't doing it for me.
Oh, but that's the other point, Sean. I'm sorry to cut you off here, but that's the thing. At the end of the day, is like there was an interview that Stephen Colbert did with Maurice Sendak, right? And Maurice Sendak had the very long history of
I know
writing
half
books.
of those names.
Right. So Maurice Sendak, I mean, he had a very long career writing children's books, and I remember that Stephen Colbert asked me, he said, how'd you get into writing children's books? And he said, I didn't. I just wrote books. And somebody said, oh, that's for children. He said, I never deliberately wrote for children. I just wrote a story. And I think that's what it is at the end of the day with any art form. You're going to give birth to this thing out of your mind, be it as a comic book, a movie, a portrait, whatever. And people are going to interact with it however they interact with it. Now, surely you can influence who's going to want to interact with it. I mean, if you draw some very busty women in capes flying around and that kind of thing, you're going to attract a particular audience versus if you wrote it some other way. Yeah. But exactly. But it's that sort of thing at the end of the day. I think his criticisms have a basis for him. I think they're worth listening to a little bit. I think it is a challenge for people when he talks about how the comics presented a very simple view of something. I think sure, maybe they did, and maybe people do need to challenge themselves to see sort of the fringes of the whole thing, because there's no hero that's purely good unto themselves, right? You can't have one thing without some element of the other. But yeah, he did lose me on that part where he tied the superhero movies to Trump getting elected. I thought that was ridiculous.
Yeah, there was nonsense, man. And to say that something like that can't be nuanced and mature and fun that way. I mean, is the Odyssey for 12-year-olds?
Sure.
I
That's
mean,
right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
These are classics that are essentially superhero stories. And I tell you what, if they could have drawn as well as Jim Lee or they'd have done it back then too, just to, add more gravitas to the story. All they could do was put
Can you
it in
imagine
writing.
how much more interesting Egyptian hieroglyphics would be if they
Yeah.
adopted a modern comic style?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
if you'd have done like a moving sculpture thing, something like that. But
see,
you
Go
know
ahead.
what I mean? These
Yeah.
these are not to reduce it to that. Or The Hobbit. The Hobbit, is he wrote that for his grandchildren. But would you
Mhm.
say that's a children's story? At the end, half the people, die in a great war, a huge war, and then leads into Lord of the Rings, which is not a separate universe, the same universe, but is considered great literary work, and the Silmarillion and all that. I just think it's very reductive of him to do that, bitter, if you will, for that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and to what would you consider high art then? What is it? Because if you're talking about comics, well, what is a painting? Painting's essentially a comic. There you go. It's the same thing, same medium.
Minus the word bubble.
Right. Well,
Right.
sometimes they even have that in there, right?
Although one of my favorite comics of all time ever had no words in it at all.
Yes,
Yeah, Joe.
that's right.
Oh.
GI back when it was good. That's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
Snake Eyes.
Larry
That was
Hama.
There was a good one.
What 12-year-old loved that? Yeah.
Yeah, that was for 12-year-olds.
That one was good. I disagree with that. There's a good bit of bitterness that comes out of that, and
That's what it felt like. It felt like bitterness and sour grapes. And it's sad because Alan Moore is right up there. When you talk about like people who have defined the medium and done well and won a bunch of awards, like he is up there with I put him in a room with any other creator, and in some way, let's face it, Stan Lee created a bunch of really campy stuff.
He did,
and it's been modernized, it's been polished, it's been cleaned up and put out as some of the modern Marvel stuff. But let's be honest, he was writing for 12-year-olds, and it's not to minimize what he's done, but Alan Moore was like, I'm gonna crack my knuckles and start writing, and he put out some really adult stuff, and I think he's doing himself a disservice by putting the sour grapes in there. And I'll say this, like, okay, we get it. You got hosed on some of your licensing deals and some of the bigger, well, let's be honest, DC did not treat him well. They didn't treat him as a partner. They treated him like, haha, the fine print says that we can just keep this thing in print and make all the money and you don't really get any. That's a terrible thing to do, and I'm not gonna give DC slack on that.
Yeah.
But in today's day and age, if Alan Moore went to Kickstarter and said, I'm going to do, this is my next project, who wants to throw 20 or 30 or 40 bucks at me, and you're going to get this exclusive Alan Moore creation, whether, drawn by so-and-so or written by, me or, however, dude could bypass the comic industry. He's got a big enough name and a big enough following, enough people. Like, cool, you don't want to play that way anymore? You don't have to. This isn't the same comics industry you grew up in. Because remember, what is it? Rob Liefeld and them, they ran off and started Image Comics, right?
Yeah, I know.
Part of the same reason. They're like, we want control of our creations. Image was a big, big deal back when it started. And now there's basically three big ones and a couple of small ones. What's that, Sean?
He was a part of that too. Remember, he had some comics with them.
Did he?
Did Alan Moore have comics with them?
Okay. Remember Tom Strong and what was the one about the city full of superheroes?
Top 10?
Top 10, thank you.
Was that it? Okay.
I don't know. It was one of those independent things.
But regardless, I don't care.
But the thing is that I think that's probably part of it, is that he's very good creatively, and probably not very good business wise because he doesn't care about it. He cares about respect. He wants respect. He wants someone to respect his stuff and say, man, you've done really good. I'm going to do right by you because you did right by me. You've given me the best of yourself in your story, so I'm going to give you the best of me in business. And instead, it doesn't work
Right, but
that
see,
way.
here's the thing, though.
Instead,
Alan Moore has worked with some amazing people in the industry.
yeah.
If Alan Moore wants to just write comics and do that,
No, I
I'm
get
sure
that.
somebody would be willing to say, Alan, you want to write some comics? Cool. I'm an artist. Here's a couple of business dudes, colorists and letterers, and let's put this team together, and you can literally write whatever you want.
Yeah.
We're going to get it drawn. We're going to get it
No, I
published. We're
get
going to do a Kickstarter. It's going to go right out to the fans who want it,
Right.
and he could live happily ever after the rest of his life,
Well,
making money
what's left
doing
of
it.
it. But the thing, I get what you're saying. What I'm saying is that at the time he did this stuff,
Yeah.
it wasn't the same story, and so the scars were left on him.
That's
And
right.
he's looking out there now, and I think seeing a field that is far more accepted and far more liberal with how they would actually go ahead
Yeah.
and honor his work. And man, that's got to be maddening. You look at that and think, why couldn't that have been there when I was doing my thing? And how different would it have been? And think of like Frank Miller with RoboCop and all the stuff he did with them, and he's got a bit of bitterness, not as much, but a bit of bitterness towards Hollywood and that sort of thing as well, which was kind of ameliorated a little bit with Vice. You know what I'm talking? Sin City.
Sin City.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but he had a bit of that too. I think the fact that they were so creative, that people like them, so creative and so good at it, is what made them so ripe for becoming bitter. Someone who's not as good at being creative, and let's be honest, Stan Lee he put a lot of crap out there and things stuck sometimes and that sort of thing, but he wasn't the most creative. He was more campy. He was like a living version of the 60s Batman series with some seriousness stuff thrown in there every now and again. It was like Stan Lee.
I'd liken it more to a house painter versus an artist.
Yeah, there you go.
Stan Lee was out there painting houses. He was getting the job done, and he was like, "We're going to make this look good enough for somebody to move into this house."
That's
Whereas
exactly
Alan Moore
it.
was like,
I'm
going to paint the Sistine Chapel.
That's
or
exactly
whatever.
That's exactly it. Stan Lee was more of a industrial level creator. Like a manufacturer, he was just pumping stuff out, and they were artists or are artists. And it was like Stan Lee was created for 12-year-olds, and just hit the boxes, boom, throw it out there. Here's something cool. Here's a cool
Right.
concept.
And to be honest, that was his market.
Yeah, that was his market.
12-year-olds
Yeah,
were the market for comic books.
absolutely.
And so, like, I don't want to make that sound like it's a controversial statement.
Well, no,
But I don't think
not at all,
Alan Moore
because
ever
I
really
think-
wrote comics for 12-year-olds.
Right. And for Stan Lee, I think the ironic part is that a lot of the creative people were motivated by what he put out there and took what he made and made it so much better. So that you end up with like, Captain America Civil War, which was good enough that Legal Eagle guy made a whole video about the Sokovia Accords and the legality of it, and would it go through and all that. And so to give him his due, you can't throw out all of Stan Lee's stuff by saying, well, that's all 12-year-old stuff. Well, no, it actually inspired a lot of those 12-year-olds as they grew up and wanted those characters and the stories to grow with them because they saw things like Watchmen and Swamp Thing and all that.
But I think at the end of the day, that's one of the things I want to make 2 points. Number one, I've never met an artist who doesn't at some point start to complain about what their body of work or an entire industry at all,
or their
right?
body.
Right, that too. It happens, and it is what it is. But the other part is talking about, Sean, your point of saying, look at what the industry's done now versus what it did when I was in it and that kind of thing. And Mark, to your point of having sour grapes, I think it comes down to the point of what did you actually want out of this industry when you were part of it, right? I mean, what did you go there for? Did you go there to write material that was going to advance an industry beyond where it was? Were you going to write material that was going to challenge everybody? Or did you just want to go and, have some fun doing a thing that you liked, and you know, because at the end of the day, what I find is that a lot of people are just frustrated because they didn't meet whatever it was they actually wanted out of their little adventure through life.
Well, I
You got to
wonder.
know what you were going into it for.
Well, I wonder to that point. I would guess it was kind of like what Mark said, where the guy who wrote the children's book
Yeah,
said, I didn't actually write a children's book. I wrote a book. Everybody
yeah,
said it was a children's book. Again, I'm nowhere near the level of any of these people we're talking about, but I remember sitting in that meeting up at Games Workshop and them looking at that Gene Stealer that I sculpted. And what's his face? I won't say his name. He's sitting in there, Mr. Bean, for anyone who knows uh, Games Workshop. He sounds just like him. He's sitting in that meeting with me, and he looks at this Gene Stealer hybrid head that I sculpted, and says, "Well, he looks a bit like Homer, doesn't he?" Right? And that pissed me off. That pissed me off, man. I showed him the cover of the White Dwarf and said, "That's the head I sculpted. That's the one you had on the cover of your. Did you put Homer on the cover of your book?" You know, he was doing that, and the amount of anger that I felt at how he was seeing my work,
yeah.
was just mind boggling to me. I look back on that, and even now it makes me angry. And the anger is because he's reducing my vision. He's changing, altering, and reducing my vision to something stupid, especially because it was based on something they already had out. And so I look at Alan Moore, Frank Miller, or any of the other ones, and you can understand when you put so much effort and so much care and so much time and all this creativity and energy into this thing, and in 2 minutes, some dude who doesn't have an ounce of creativity in their whole body sits there and says something inane like that. Oh my God, you want to just break them, So I get why they feel that way. And I don't think they got into the industry with any ideas to what they were going to do other than whatever they felt in the moment. You get an image in your head or a story in your head. For me, it was an image. You get an image in your head and you figure, okay, I'm going to make that image. And that's it. That's what you do. You're not really going into it with an idea of anything more than that. And the other side of it, the business side of it, doesn't get that. They think of it as, I'm guessing, like they would any long-term business plan and, that sort of, and it doesn't work the same way. So
Mhm.
maybe that's part of it. But without that, I don't know if you have the creativity. I think you have to have many times the bitter,
Without what?
angry artist.
Oh, the bitter, angry art, and that could be a thing. But the thing, and I've I talk to a lot of people in the music side of creativity, right? Because that's where I hang out. But in that, I've discussed a lot the idea that you have to know as an artist that you're going to put something out and then you have to let it go. It's going to have whatever life it's going to have, right? I think there is something that fuels the artist to create. There's definitely a creative force in that. But at the point where a creation is done, and I have yet to meet an artist who claims anything is ever done, but at the point where you let it go, I think the artist has to step away from it.
Yeah, I
It's
don't know how
it's going
you
to be
do that.
yours. It's yours. It's whatever passion you still have connected to. Nothing cancels that, but you can't tie yourself to what the masses are going to say about
I know, but it's maddening. I
it. It is.
remember
I grant you that.
Mark and I were at Springfield Mall, and there I had the sculpture of the female elf that I was
Yeah.
doing, and there was this guy there with his girlfriend, and she starts reading me the riot act about why aren't there more female characters? Why don't you spend more time doing female characters? And I was like, I got one in my hand. What are you talking about? Why are you yelling at me? I'm doing art. What the hell? I'm not here for some social agenda thing and that kind of stuff. It's just, I don't know. It's easy to get involved because you put so much of yourself into it and you just hope that people would look at it and go, you know what? I can see the effort you put into that and it really shows through. I enjoy that quite a bit. And
Yeah.
then I can sit there and say, thank you so much, because I personally look at it and see all the mistakes and how it sucks and all that. So I
Right.
appreciate you saying that this came through. Instead, if they come to you and tell you everything that's wrong with it, and there's a lot of people that like doing that, I mean, you want to smack some dudes in the mouth. You want to use their heads like an eraser on the road. And I can see that in like Alan Moore with what he's talking about. And I think that's just a lifetime of that, really. which is a shame. But like I said, I think it's probably very necessary. Otherwise, you wouldn't have works like Watchmen and all that.
But I think in that, well, another couple things to your point of, you want some feedback, some acceptance, some sort of appreciation for what you created, right?
For the effort.
Yeah, for the effort in it, and it reminded me for a moment of my first, because I like to do public speaking. It's a thing. I've got like a whole thing where I do that. But um, I remember my first presentation was to a trade group in Corpus Christi, and I called a friend of mine and I said, you know, what if they hate it? What if they hate it? I mean, that'll be soul crushing to me if they hate it. What if nobody gets it? What if only one person walks away hearing what I said?
Mm.
And my friend Megan, she said, sometimes, Kelly, you just have to go for the one person who's going to see it and accept it. And in most cases, you might not even know that one person was there because they might not come say anything to you. But you have to hang yourself on the idea that one person is going to hear what you say instead of a room full of people. And I think it's the same thing with any other art form.
You're probably right. You're probably right. But if 99 people out of 100 line up afterwards and come up and tell you how you suck,
sure,
it would piss you off.
That's why you stop taking questions and you walk off the podium.
Yeah. Or
right. Yeah.
Honestly, like she said, there is something to taking the attitude, I don't care. And I understand, and I'll tell you where I understand that is when I was doing instructing for firearms and stuff. I would tell students this all the time. I'd give them all the basics, all the rules, all the fundamentals and principles of good shooting and all that. And I tell them, but the most important one is not caring. Just don't care. When you get out there, and they didn't understand what I meant most of the time. There were a few who did, but most of them didn't get it. You get out there and you start worrying, am I going to do good? Am I going to pass this? And all that. Are people going to look at me as I'm going to be out in front of everyone shooting? I'm going to fail, and all this. And I said, the reason I do well, the reason I, shoot as well as I do is because I don't care what you think. I really don't. I'm there to do my thing. And I know that I'm going to try to make myself better than I was yesterday. I don't care if you appreciate that or not. If I could apply that to my art, I think I'd be more free. I really do. But I don't know how you do that, because the whole point of art is to evoke an emotion in someone. And writing a story and doing you're trying to influence someone and you're looking for that feedback.
But the emotion,
I don't know how you escape that.
The emotion that you evoke is not going to be the same one you felt in creating it.
I know, but that's the frustration. That's what I'm saying.
I go to like Beethoven, for example. When Beethoven wrote the Moonlight Sonata, and that's not what it's called, but that's the name that everybody knows it by.
And it was genius, by the way, so he couldn't hear the complaints. Just want to throw that in there.
Strategically went deaf.
Yes.
But it was very popular in his day. People really loved this sonata. And one evening he remarked to a friend of his, he said, surely I've written something better. But that's the thing that connects, and it will connect, and it has a life of its own. And so I think how do you do it? You have to make a determined effort to just do it, to just say, okay, this is now out there and I'm going to walk away from it. And it's not easy to do by any stretch.
You can't tell me though, apply this to your public speaking.
Yeah.
The two things that meant the most to me that I've made were the Gray Knight that I sculpted, and the guy who used to work at Games Workshop, Alan. Do you remember him, Mark? I went and saw him and said, hey, I want to give you one of these. You were one of the guys that inspired me for this. And he broke down crying. He cried about it. He thought it was beautiful. That moved me. That was amazing. That feeling was amazing. And then the one I sculpted of Mark, those two are the ones.
Mark?
He did.
A nude. It's a nude.
I've been in White Dwarf magazine. Be jealous.
Mark in repose.
And that other one was a prize at a game day. That Gray Knight. But those two were the ones that gave me the most fulfillment because
Sure.
of that feedback, and I'm sure for any of the speaking engagements, when you got that, that person who comes up, or people even better, who come up and tell you that was moving, that was great, I've never seen it that way, that kind of thing,
Oh yeah.
that gives you that boost,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
But
extracting yourself from that process, I think it actually takes away some of the impetus for doing it in the first place.
yeah.
So the willingness to put yourself out there and then getting used to the abuse, I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe that's why they all end up cutting their ears off and going nuts and, doing all kinds of wacky stuff.
I think it's definitely part of the madness in it. Because
Maybe.
I agree with you. There is a want for that because it has happened to me. I got a national speaking gig out of one thing I did because the guy happened to be there. And it was great. It was, and you get that every once in a while. You don't
You
get it
feel
every
elated,
time.
right?
It's really sort of affirming in what you're doing and how you're doing it. And it's very powerful. But I
Well,
think
it
then the
feels,
thing is you can't expect that every time because it doesn't happen every time.
well, it doesn't, but when it does, it makes you feel like maybe you've accomplished what you were trying, which was connect with someone
Yeah.
else, to
Yeah.
give them that emotion that you were trying to get through there, or whatever it was. And when you get that feedback, you're like, I did it. That's good, And then when you get a bunch of people who are like, nah, that sucks, or why aren't you doing this, or I don't like that, or it looks like this, or that kind of thing, man, it's just, you wonder to yourself, well, why even try? No wonder people turn to crime and villainy. You know what I
Oh yeah,
mean?
no. I mean, I did it. I do an interview series, and after one of the interviews I did one day, um, one of the people listening to the interview left a comment that it was like listening to Terry Gross on Fresh Air. What do you do with that? That's just high praise in my book. You know,
Or a very backhanded compliment.
right? But it's one of those things. So I get it, but then again, as the artist, I think you got to let it go. I think you really have to work at letting it go. I don't think you'll ever successfully truly let it go, but you have to be able to somehow disconnect yourself from the thing. But the other thing I think in your medium, Sean, like when that woman comes up and argues with you about, shit that you're not even part of, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't answer for the whole. I'm not the industry, right?
yeah.
It's that there are a ton of people out there that like to argue with something they can't do themselves. Rather
Yeah,
than
I
take
know.
rather than take ownership of the issue and say, okay, I'm seeing a deficit. Let me go in this direction. And I think this is even true for Alan Moore. Like, dude, if you're sitting here at this point and you're saying, hey, that whole industry is for 12-year-olds, uh, okay, go do something else with it. Obviously, you've shown you have the talent to do something else, but you're choosing at this moment to just sit here and pound sand rather than do something proactive and change the very thing you want to rail against.
Well, that's the danger, is that you do end up in that comfortable pocket of
Right.
being the victim and just being angry. And it's very easy to do because it doesn't require much. You don't
Right.
have to change anything or do anything. You just kind of wallow in it,
And I think that is the comfortable identity that a lot of people just sink into, right? That comfortable pair of slippers to say, look, I'm being shat on by enter industry here, rather than doing something proactive about it.
That's a good name for a business, by the way.
Mhm.
That
Shat
is a
on.
good name. No, 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 that's not. That would be a subdivision of
That's
enter
a
industry here.
yeah.
Incorporated.
Incorporated, yes. Limited liability, LLC.
Yeah, LLC.
The other thing I want to say about this article, though, and this was the thing that was the biggest problem for me, is that I thought the article was written in a very pretentious way. I thought whoever
Yeah,
wrote that article, um, the way it came across to me, and this came across in the very first paragraph, was this person is talking to somebody who can obviously do what they're doing and do it better, and now they're trying to step their game up. And I
yeah.
felt that the article landed very pretentious, very self-serving, and it wasn't a very good, at the end of the day, very
It
good
did
in-depth,
sound,
challenging interview.
yeah, it did sound like that, where it was kind of the, hey, I get you. I understand you.
Right.
I
Right.
get you.
And to be fair, like I haven't seen the video that, Alan Moore made that
I saw
created
a
that
bit of it.
resulted in this. Like I can't be positive that the take from the article is actually how he felt. You know,
Nah,
what
I've
didn't
seen-
make it into the article? What?
I've
Oh,
seen
sure.
his interviews, and that's actually why I stopped watching his interviews, is because it was
Yeah.
a lot. It was a lot of that. But yeah, it makes me sad in a way. But then I think about it, and I think, well, I guess that's what had to be in order for him to make what he made, you know. And whatever went into that recipe, why am I going to complain about it? Gave us that. I can put up with this. I can. He's bitter and all that stuff. Wants to make short stories and everything. Good. I hope he has great success with that. Finds happiness and all that. He's already given us these gems, and you know, if it's a blind squirrel finding a nut every now and again, great. Or if it's just his method, great. Don't care.
Right. Yeah.
Love the stuff.
And if he had found amazing success and never been screwed over by the industry, would he still have produced those?
Right.
Like,
Look at
to the
look at
level that they
Sylvester
are. I don't
Stallone.
know. I don't know the answer to that
That's
either.
a fair
right.
point.
Look
Yeah.
at Sylvester Stallone. And I don't mean that in a funny way. I know that might sound that way, but he's even said in interviews. I remember he was in an interview with Howard Stern, and he said it's hard to write like he did for Rocky after success has, happened. He said your life isn't the same. You don't feel the same, and
Yeah.
so getting that same inspiration is very difficult, and you can see that. So yeah, maybe that's just how it is. I don't know. But I mean, Alan Moore's got some money. He's got an assistant to go on the internet and everything, so he can't be hurting that bad, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
whatever.
but they don't have him doing cameos in DC movies, so
He has done a cameo in The Simpsons.
That's true.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
So what's
how
he
about
bitching
that?
about? Shut
Yeah.
up.
Yes. Well, let's be honest. It's not that hard to get on The Simpsons. I think everyone's been on The Simpsons at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's probably true. But he
I
was
have
on
not
it
been.
back when it was a
Funny?
bit more exclusive.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't
Back when
remember
it
if the
meant
episode.
something. Yeah.
I don't remember if the episode was funny.
If it wasn't in seasons 4 through 6, it's probably not worth seeing.
Back when Conan was writing with him and all that. Yeah, they had some good stuff. Yeah, the episode with Homer in the cabin with Mr. Burns is one of my favorites. I love that one. Remember when they get snowed in up there and they start start getting cabin fever, and he calls up the army with Abraham Lincoln, and and Mr. Burns has the Kaiser and all. That's great. Oh, such ridiculousness is so good.
I like that
So
one where
good.
Mr. Burns is making the sort of the beggar guy on the street dance with a
See, and
muzzle
that's
loader.
that's another example. The Simpsons. You could easily say, well, that's 12-year-old stuff. No,
It is.
No, that's timeless.
It's
That's
high-minded
timeless.
12-year-olds.
Well, it's timeless. It's the 12. If it's 12 years old, there's a certain enlightenment that you hit at 12 years old then that I hope you never, ever, ever lose. You're even told in the Bible, make yourself as the little children. There you go. So you're supposed to be like the 12-year-old. There you are. There's wisdom in that somewhere. Airplane and all those top secret, and there's a certain freedom, ridiculous freedom in all of those. It's just very funny, and that's what the Simpsons had then. So, whatever.
Well, enough about Alan Moore and his assistant.
Yeah, Alan Moore. Mark.
That's right.
Mark.
At the end of the day, though, I'm a fan of Alan Moore. I'm glad he's done what he's done. Love his work. Yes.
Kelly, you saw, I can't ask you about this yet. Because Kelly, you just started watching House of the Dragons, right?
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Well, I just thought it's like medieval drama now, isn't it?
No.
I mean, it's just like any other soap opera, man. I mean, if you've seen one medieval challenge for the throne, you've seen them all, and it's just
okay.
There's just something about the coolest thing that I saw in that show. I really liked the acting by Matt Smith, and I liked the dragons. I thought the dragons themselves were interesting, and I wanted to see more of that. Right, but there's just I thought it tried to address a number of social issues. I don't know. I mean,
see, I think you're looking at a lot of surface stuff. You're right about here's the thing. How many episodes have you gotten through?
Maybe
remember?
2 or 3. I don't
Okay,
remember
so
the
you haven't
exact
you haven't
counts.
gotten that far along. Okay, you haven't gotten that far along. This is the thing I love about Martin's works.
Yeah.
You see, and you see this if you watch people do like reactions to the show and that kind of thing. They will do what everyone does when they are watching high fantasy sort of stuff. You show the princess, you show the king, you show the, all the different characters. Everybody attaches immediately to who they figure is going to be the protagonist and all the different characters. Oh, Sir Kristen Cole, he's so handsome and so, and all this stuff and all that, all that nonsense. Martin doesn't do that, man. He will start you off with a story. You, like you said, you try to attach, oh, this is this kind of story, right? And then it's not. And he takes you into it like, okay, well, if this was real life, this is what would happen. And it takes left turns and right turns to places that you wouldn't expect. No one's safe. Everything's messed up. All that stuff is screwed up. And then you realize at the end, no one is who you thought they were going to be. And that's what I love about his work is that no matter how many times people see that stuff, they automatically start doing that, start filling in the blanks rather than letting it play out, knowing that Martin's stuff isn't going to be that way.
Right. Well, that's because most of those stories do paint by numbers like that.
Yeah, they do.
You know what I mean? Most of the media we consume tends to follow those tropes or follow, like, exactly who the protagonist of this movie is because we showed them doing something heroic in the very beginning and we're like, I like this guy, I'm going to follow him for the next 2 hours or for the next season or whatever, and we are not disappointed, right? Like that's the way that's the way we've consumed all of our media, books, movies, comics, whatever, and so that's one of the refreshing things about, I think, George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you. By the time you get to episode 8, which you just saw, Mark, would you say it's at all like it was in the first 3 episodes?
No, it definitely is. The pacing is different than I'm used to. You know what I mean? So over the course of you said it's 8 episodes, like many years pass. You know what I mean? And so there's a bit of a jump where we go from
2 jumps,
17-year-old Rhaenyra to 30-year-old Rhaenyra to much older. What you know what I'm saying? Is like, oh, okay, these characters are, it's not like I think we're used to. Let's wrap this up in 2 hours, or let's wrap this up in a season where the time frame is one of days or months. You know what I'm saying? Whereas this time frame ends up being years, so you get to see some of these, I don't know, rivalries simmer for a long time and whatnot. So,
and that's the thing. Like with Rhaenyra, as an example, one of the things about her, Kelly, people attach to her a lot of the heroine of the story arc, right? She's the hero. Everybody's Team Rhaenyra and all this, and everybody hates Alicent, and, that kind of thing. The thing is that Rhaenyra creates her own enemies. You see this in the stories. You look back on it. You know what I'm talking about, Mark. You can see how she created all the monsters that are in her life. She made them. She made those. And the people who watch this are still not quite getting that as it's going along. Now, not saying that Rhaenyra is an evil character or any of that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a realistic portrayal of a person who at a very young age is trying to live up to this ideal and be this person that she thinks she wants to be and all of that. And it has no awareness for many of the things that an older person hopefully would have the wisdom to realize, and it ends up having repercussions that magnify over time. And Viserys and his, oh my God, what a tragic story his is, And by the end of this first season, by the end of this first eight episodes, I told Helena, I said, the real story hasn't even started yet. It doesn't start until that, that seminal moment at the end of episode 8. And this is what I love about his works. Now, it's not everybody's cup of tea, and all that. But I find it intriguing to see his character arcs. I love it. And this was because when I was reading Game of Thrones, I remember the moment was when Jaime in Storm of Swords. I was reading about Jaime and Brienne on the King's Road, and the bit where he goes and fights to get her back, to save her life, and I remember reading that and thinking, oh my God, I started out this story hating this guy. And now, over the course of these books, he is now one of my favorite characters. And I see this whole other side of him that just seemed like it wasn't in existence at all in the beginning. And you can understand, and it wasn't like it was a trick or a twist or any of that. It's just over time, you see more and more of this person until you understand what is potentially there, what is there. That style of writing I find very, very intriguing and entertaining, and that's what I love about all his works that way. Anyway, do you feel the same, Mark?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like I say, he's it's refreshing, right? Reading something like that. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I will say this: my wife and I finished Game of Thrones earlier today.
Oh, really?
So like she's loving it up to it. I'm like, season 8, just wait. And we watched the first 3 episodes, and she's like, I like this so far. And then I was like, just wait, finish out season 8. And then so we finished the season, earlier today. And she was kind of like, yeah, now I see what you were talking about. I said, wait till you've had a chance to sit with it for a minute. It'll get worse. You know what I'm saying? So but again, none of that is George R. R. Martin's fault, because he didn't have much, if anything, to do with
didn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
I felt bad, the most for in that whole thing was Jon Snow. His character got screwed. Spent all that time fighting against the White Walkers and fighting against the Night King and all that stuff, and then at the last moment, Arya comes in, and
Yeah. Again, I will still say, this was the great danger that was in episode 1, right? The one guy who flees the Night's Watch, that Ned Stark ends up beheading for leaving the Night's Watch. He was running away from the White Walkers. So from episode 1. We're dealing with this great enemy, and the buildup was amazing, and then we wrapped it all up in one episode.
Yeah,
it just didn't. It felt cheap. Was it a cool scene with Arya jumping through the air? Yeah, it was a cool scene, but we built a 700-foot wall to keep these things out, and we tie it up with a 17-year-old girl and a knife, and some big tactically stupid battle. That I was like, it just felt like
it was frustrating. It really was. Yeah.
That whole thing could have gone on for seasons more.
Yeah.
Imagine this army of the dead and Winter following with them, marching all the way down to King's Landing.
Yeah.
Right. Or whatever. You know what I mean? That is the kind of apocalypse that would cause you to build a 700-foot tall wall.
Now, Martin said himself that this story, House of the Dragons, would take 4 seasons to tell.
Okay. And that's the thing that I like. If you know ahead of time, this is how many seasons I want to tell this story, and here's what it's going to take, knock yourself out. A lot of times we're going to do a season of this, or we're going to do a pilot, like a test, to see what happens. And episode 1 lands, and they're like, this is great. Battlestar Galactica is an excellent example of this. Like season 1 Battlestar Galactica, they're like, boy, I hope the new one with Katie Sackhoff, they're like, boy, I hope this thing lands. And it did. It landed well. And the fans were like, oh man, we're on board. And you could tell they were like, oh, this got really popular. What do we do now? Yeah. Boy, do I have an idea. And you're like, oh, come on, guys. Have a little bit more forethought. How do you pitch? Hey man, we're gonna do this reboot of Battlestar Galactica. We're gonna swap out, some of the characters, and now Cylons look like people. And like, okay, that's an interesting pitch. Like, let's go with it. You really hadn't thought any further ahead than that. You know what I mean? Like, come on, you're creating something. How's it gonna end?
Breaking Bad was one that did it well.
Mm-hmm.
Had a definite beginning.
I don't know if they had that planned out from the beginning.
I don't either, but they did it. They did it successfully. you know,
And they did
which,
such a good job of ratcheting the stakes from season to season. Because in season 1, they don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and in season 2, it's like Tuco and them, and then it gets weird. And then, and then by the end, it's like this, it's a high level cartel stuff going on, where it started at the street level stuff. So they did such a good job, whether they planned it or not. It was so well done that you were like, oh, what's this next chapter going to be like? This is interesting, right? So
now I wanted to ask you, Mark, how, because I know you've been telling me you're waiting to see this, thing about Damon that I like so much and all that. So I'm intrigued to see as the episodes go, kind of a, barometer. What do you think of Damon now?
Feeling I like him. I've always liked the character. I'm not feeling what you're feeling.
Okay.
Because I think you've read the books and you have some insight that I don't, having not read the book this was based on.
Understood. That's why I just wanted to, I just wanted to take the temperature.
Right. He brooked no argument when that guy was disparaging the parentage of his adopted children, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
what'd you think about Aemon?
Which one's Aemon?
The one with the eye patch.
Oh, okay, yeah. I remember them fighting as kids and whatnot. Like,
now don't ruin it for Kelly. He hasn't seen
it. It was really interesting to see them go from like these little children to young adults. You know what I'm saying? That's what I mean. Yeah. Like we're letting this stuff simmer, right? So we see them as kids fighting, and the one he ends up losing his eye during this tussle, if you will. Like nobody was trying to kill anybody.
No need to see it now.
It was kids fighting. It was kids fighting. Whatever. And now he's a young adult with rocking the eye patch, looking badass. So it's going to be interesting to see the effect this has on his character. He comes off
he's another
swaggery and arrogant.
He's another one of the characters I find most interesting. Him and Damon I find very interesting, and I love the fact that they had like that little standoff with those two, at the end, and it reminded me very much of like, it was almost like they were doing a homage to lions, how you got the older male lion who's still got it and he's still in charge and he just stands up there and Aemon's like, and walks off. Someday. And there's a lot of stuff that's coming that I think you'll dig a lot. Kelly, I hope you stick with it just to at least, see what the story gives you the rest of the way. It's not like the other stuff that you would think. I can't think of another show that I can say, oh, this is that. I can't think of another one that's like that.
But it's just my comment is just that it's the same old intrigue, right? I mean, everybody's angling for something. Everybody's got their little political game that they're playing, and you're watching the chess pieces move across the board. And then I'm sitting there and I'm asking, well, what is this trying to tell me?
Right, but this one has dragons.
Yeah. See, Viserys doesn't have any angle like that. Viserys has no angle like that. Viserys simply wants his family to get along. Simply wants his family to have love and happiness and all of that. He's a good guy. And his character has no political ambition. Rhaenyra never wanted the crown. She didn't want to do that. Her dad ended up making her the heir to the throne, and she kind of wanted to live up to that, and now thinks there's, that she's going to do this to show that she can. And Alicent, of course, never wanted to be in the position she was in and was manipulated by her father, who does want that power. And so she never wanted that and ended up, getting on the wrong side of Rhaenyra and
right, but you can see that play out in the characters early on. While Rhaenyra may have not wanted the crown, it's also this thing that she knew was outside her grasp because she knew that there was the overall support to have a male heir, and oh my God, how could we have a female heir? I mean, I believe the Japanese ran into this with the Emperor issue recently. And so I mean it was there, but then she had it. I mean it's she doesn't want the thing that she now has, and now she is hell-bent to show everybody that she can do it, and she's exercising her power and saying, I'm not some weak female.
See, you're getting caught on that, and that's not what it is.
No, but that's not what the whole show is, but that's the arc of her character right now.
No, it's not. No, it's not. That's my point. It's not. people think it's going to be this, and it's not what you think it's going to be. It's
All
not.
right, we will revisit after Kelly has seen the rest of the episode.
Well, if he wants, if he doesn't dig him, he doesn't dig him. I'm not gonna
no,
cram
he's
him down
going
his
to
throat,
watch
you
all
know?
of the episodes. We are going to cram them down his throat. It's your
No,
homework,
it's-
Kelly.
No, and I will do my homework dutifully, right? But this is also a thing, is that it's very hard for somebody to get me to watch the show. Over the years, so many folks have said, "Oh, you've got to go see this thing," and I am so picky, so choosy. And you guys know full well, you've seen my K-Man reviews. When have I yet given a positive K-Man review to much of anything? I think I've written one, right? So I mean, it's just that thing. I go in with everything with this air
I
of
would
like,
just hope that you would give a little more credence to a recommendation from us. That's all.
I don't know. Somebody recommended that I see the Star Wars movie. Oh, I think it was Russ told me to go see that one Star Wars movie that I wrote a 22 point bulletin about how it was wrong. But I mean, but that's
I
what
didn't
Russ
tell you
was
to go
hoping
see
I would
any
do
of
with it.
Yeah.
You know, but it's a thing.
Got it.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right, we won't steer you wrong, Kelly.
Did
Stick
you?
with us.
Yeah. I see Kelly, especially. I thought would really like the Damon character.
I actually I didn't
know.
mind. I didn't mind Damon, right? Number one, I really like Matt Smith as an actor. I think he's fantastic, right? And so it was good to see him do something that wasn't Doctor Who related, right? Because I still see
Right.
him as Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good. I think his acting, his storytelling is superb. I'm just, you know, at the moment I'm still a reluctant consumer of the story that he's now put in. Although I appreciate how he's doing it. So
Yeah,
there's that.
his character is my favorite, if for no other reason, and there are other reasons, Mark, but if for no other reason than the fact that he doesn't play the game. You know, whatever is on his mind, whatever he's going to say, he's pretty much going to say it, you know, and whatever he's going to do, he's going to pretty much do it. And he's not playing anybody else's game or any of that. Out of all the characters, I think his is the most free. Because of that. Aemon would be a close second on that point. Viserys is actually the one I find most constrained.
Okay. Well, we will revisit. Kelly, do your homework as you can. And like I said, we didn't talk anything about like, and we're not going to start now, but because we're up against the timeline. But like, you know, She-Hulk, Andor, Lord of the Rings of Power. There's a whole lot of media that has dropped and
Don't get me started on the Rings of Power. Jesus.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that episode.
That lost me in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. And I will see you next time.
Indeed.
All right,
Peace out.
boys. See ya.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.